Hi, everybody. My name is Miles, and I'm with Peak Performers. I'm a disability inclusion partner here at Peak, and I am so excited to be bringing you the webinar today. Today, we're going to be talking about building a disability inclusive hiring process. We've got an amazing lineup of panelists here today for you. But first off, I wanted to say thank you. We've done several of these webinars over the course of 2025 and over 2024. So those of you who are returning to join us, thank you very much for returning to join us. It really brings me so much joy that it brings you value. And for those of you that are coming and joining us for the very first time, thank you. You're welcome to be here. Take a second right now to go ahead and leave your contact information into the chat. I feel like a lot of times during the course of these virtual events, we've gotten out of the habit of networking, but use this as an opportunity to find like-minded professionals such as you that are just as passionate about disability inclusion and hiring. And for those of you who don't know much about that yet, you are in the right place. We're here to talk a little bit more about how you can build a more disability inclusive hiring and interview process specifically. So now, without any further ado, I'm going to be bringing on Aaron Bangor. Aaron Bangor is the president of our Disability in Central Texas chapter. And if you are in Austin, I would very much encourage you to join our local chapter so you can further participate in the events. Aaron, welcome and happy Tuesday to you, sir.
Thanks, Miles. Hello and welcome to everybody out there in LinkedIn land, as well as those folks that are in the Central Texas area. This is our latest webinar in the Disability Inclusion Academy, hosted by Disability in Central Texas and our presenting partner, Peak Performers. Thank you, Miles, and Peak Performers for your great partnership on these. Disability in Central Texas is the local affiliate for Disability In, which is a national organization that partners with the world's leading companies to advance disability inclusion in the digital and physical workplace, marketplace, and supply chain. And to keep up with our events, please follow us on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to me on there if there's anything you'd like to learn more about Disability in Central Texas, or you're just interested in how to get how to level up your organization's disability inclusion efforts. Today's discussion is, as Miles mentioned, is building disability inclusive interviews, and I'm particularly excited about this one because interviews are a gateway to employment, which is a great benefit to the individual, but also to companies and organizations of all different sizes, as well as society as a whole. And for people with disabilities, employment is a crucial component of self-determination and independence, two great goals that people with and without disability share. But for organizations, employment of people with disabilities is an underdeveloped area of their talent strategy to support their success, as well as the innovation we all need to keep adapting to this world that is changing, almost on a moment by moment scale. So
it changes fast, doesn't it, Aaron? Man, yeah. It's like I feel like it's just 24/7 now, and things are changing every single day. So yeah, and we are happy to be here as a resource for you, because a lot of times what we find is we just find other like-minded professionals who want to find people to talk to kind of stay up to date, to keep up with industry trends, to learn about the news, and just learn about how they can be more active and engaged and proactive during times that are changing. That's something that's really important to us here.
Yeah, sometimes it just, I think we sometimes we're at a loss for answers on what to do, or maybe some doubt on things, and having some folks that are, going through, trying to figure those things out at the same time. I always tell, our membership that, on our own, we only have some of the answers, but collectively, we've got a lot more answers than that, and particularly about this specialized area of disability inclusion. You may be at an organization where that's an interest to you, or maybe you are a group of one dealing with that, or maybe a very small group, but within other organizations that are trying to tackle these opportunities. It's a great place to, as you said, Miles, kind of meet others bounce some ideas off each other, talk through some things, and that's what we do. And last year we started this series of webinars to bring some sort of evergreen topics out there to a wider audience here on LinkedIn, just to make sure that this conversation is continuing. And as I mentioned, today we've got a great lineup of speakers. Miles, as always, does a phenomenal job of finding folks with a great expertise and insight and lived experience to share with the audience here. So, Miles, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us kicked off on today's webinar.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aaron. And by the way, Aaron is going to be in the chat on LinkedIn, so he'll be communicating and responding to it. By the way, Paul, thank you for your comment right there. I'm sorry that the closed captionings are not pushing through. Try refreshing your browser. And if not, I sincerely apologize. We tried to make sure that the closed captionings were pushing through, but please let me know if you're having trouble with that. And if not, I'll do everything that I can to make sure that you have an accessible format post-event too. You also, if you're using Chrome, you might be able to turn on the auto captioning feature right there. And again, I'm sorry, I hope that we can get this resolved for you shortly here too. But thank you to everybody else that was able to hop on and introduce yourself. We've got so many amazing people that are jumping on, and I'm so excited to have you. And now I'm going to be inviting each of the folks in and introducing them one at a time to our show. So first off, we're going to have Travis. Hiya, Travis. How's it going?
Good, Miles. How are you?
Well, I'm doing good. And Travis, I'm so glad to have you here. So Travis is an ADA coordinator, entrepreneur, podcaster, and celebrated TEDx speaker. His mission is to empower companies to build inclusive cultures through psychological safety. He strives to build inclusive working environments where every individual feels empowered and valued. Travis provides tailored solutions to help companies fully utilize the talent of individuals with disabilities. Travis, thanks a lot. So glad to have you.
That was such a great introduction. Thank you so much, Miles.
Well, you're welcome. And next up, we have Donna Bungard. Hiya, Donna. How's it going?
It's going all right. How are you doing today, Miles?
Doing good, doing good. So Donna is the Director of Accessibility at Indeed, leading initiatives that drive inclusivity and workplace best practices. With deep expertise in disability inclusion, digital accessibility, and equitable design, she collaborates across teams to support Indeed's commitment to helping job seekers facing barriers find employment. Passionate about the intersection of disability inclusion and business impact, Donna advocates for a future where better work is truly possible for everyone. Dang, that resonates with me so well, Donna.
Happy to be here.
All right. And next up, we have Larissa Minner. By the way, Larissa is having a little bit of trouble with her video camera right here. Just want to let you know that she is here and she's very happy to be chatting with us. She's just having a little bit of trouble with her video camera, so she's going to be using something that just shows her initials. So Larissa is a neurodivergent, multiple disabled speaker, trainer, and national award-winning researcher at UT Austin's Texas Center for Disability Studies. She leads a lived experience research advisory committee and has trained organizations like PayPal, the Autism Society of Texas, and Safe Alliance on Disability and Neuroinclusion. An international keynote speaker, Larissa also serves in executive leadership on a National Disability Council, co-hosts 2 disability-focused podcasts, runs a neurodivergent YouTube channel, and creates continuing education training, programming, and accessible content centered on equity. Larissa, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy that you were able to as well. All right, and now it's time to bring the whole Brady Bunch panel in. All right, we've got Larissa, we've got Travis, we've got Donna, we got me, we're ready to go. And without any further ado, we're gonna dive right into some of the questions that we have at hand. And Travis's first one is going to be for you. So, there's a lot of apprehension that surrounds the whole field of disability, and many people feel like they have to walk on eggshells around folks with disabilities. And I hope, if nothing else, that you walk away with this presentation with no longer having that feeling that you have to walk around on eggshells. But I want to get straight to the point. So, Travis, when a candidate discloses a disability in an interview, how should a hiring manager respond?
I think the hiring manager should respond with empathy, and if they're disclosing it, I feel like that is an invitation for the hiring manager to ask questions, not so much about digging into that person's disability, but what type of accommodations um, that they could provide to the individual, and just let the candidate lead if they want to talk more about their disability that they disclosed, but definitely hiring managers, it would be in their best interest to just have that discussion and figure out what the best solution would be to accommodate if they were to get hired.
Absolutely. So this is the start of the conversation, and what I describe is that it's okay to show curiosity as long as you do it in a respectful manner, and as long as you do it in a way that's not going to call attention in any kind of negative sense to that individual. Is that kind of like how you would describe it too?
I think so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, having cerebral palsy, and I've been in interviews before, good and bad. But I think, one of the most important things, like you said, is um, just having that dialogue and just making the other person feel comfortable, and not just zeroing in on the disability, because that it can provide challenges, and, the biases and all that. So, yeah, I mean, I also try to also look at it from their perspective too. Not that it's my responsibility to make them feel comfortable, but yeah.
I love it. I love it. Donna and Larissa, anything that you would add to that from your experience?
I'd like to lean into what you mentioned, Miles, about respect, because it's perfectly okay to not understand what the person is describing, or to essentially want to get past your own lived experiences. Um, I tell people I'm mysteriously neurodivergent. It was the late 80s, early 90s. No one knows what to do with me back then. So I'm something. But my point is, if people, they only knew the ADHDers who were running around in circles at school, and they weren't sure what to do with somebody who was presenting very differently. Well, they might have questions of, wait a second, you never want to say, well, you don't seem blah, 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 whatever it is, but want to say about, how does this impact your work? How does this impact the way you want us to communicate with you? What are your access needs to make sure we're setting you up for success? And I think respect is the core of that, because the idea is about maximizing every employee's potential. And in order to do that, it's about asking questions related to that role so they are set up for that success.
I love that. Yeah, do what you can to kind of set them up for success. Absolutely. Built on a foundation of trust, built on a foundation of respect as well. And moving right along, Larissa, I'm going to direct the next question to you. So, first off, what might an accommodation look like during an interview, and how can we let candidates know that accommodations are available during the interviews? Larissa, we can't hear you quite yet.
Testing.
Yep, can hear you okay.
Okay,
Go ahead.
great. Thanks for your patience with the technical difficulties. Reasonable accommodation is just a change that helps the qualified candidate with a disability fully participate and without creating undue burden for the employer. And I would say, spoiler, emailing the types of questions to expect in an interview is definitely not a burden. Accommodations vary depending on the person, but some common examples that could come up in the interview include a wheelchair accessible space, a quiet or low sensory environment, which I've needed, interview questions in large print or screen reader friendly formats, flexible scheduling or breaks. When scheduling interviews, be clear and proactive. let candidates know what to expect, like how many interviewers, or if there's a test, where and how it will take place, and how long it will last. It helps us know what accommodations we might need and let people know that they're welcome to request accommodations. I always recommend asking every candidate up front if they need anything to make the interview work better for them. That can be automated during scheduling, and honestly, it makes it easier for everyone to ask. I have felt more comfortable asking for accommodations when I knew everyone was being asked. If you're worried the word accommodation might discourage people from requesting needed support, you can simply say, is there anything we can adjust to help you bring your best to the interview? Uh, some organizations also use something called universal design. That just means building accessibility into the process from the start rather than waiting for someone to request it. Think of it like automated captions. It's available to everyone, but it's helpful to many. In interviews, universal design might look like offering questions in advance, letting candidates choose remote or in person, sharing questions in multiple formats, spoken, written, or visual, letting candidates revisit a tough question at the end, and allowing a support person with clear expectations. Not everyone will need these kinds of supports, but designing interviews so more people can succeed helps everyone. Even small tweaks like clarifying vague questions can make a huge difference. And just to be clear, universal design doesn't replace accommodations, it just makes the process more inclusive by default.
I love so many of the things that you said right there. Realistically, the best use case that you can do for you is just simply making accommodations available to everyone that comes to interview you and making it very public that you are there to support with that particular need as well. And what I've observed over the years is that just because people aren't asking you for accommodations right now doesn't mean that they're not needed. There's a lot of people out there that just feel awkward about asking for it. And so if you simply take the step of extending yourself and making sure that it's clear that we welcome any kind of accommodation request, then it really does go a long way to ensuring that people can self-advocate and request what they need to be successful. Travis or Donna, anything that you would add?
Go for it, Donna. You go
No, I
first.
was actually waiting for you. I saw
Oh,
that. Jump in.
oh, that's fine. Um, I don't think so. I think Larissa shared a lot of the things that I echo and believe. Making sure that that the candidate is comfortable with the questions and as I mentioned, I've had good interviews and I've had bad interviews. But yeah, I think for the most part, there's always been communication in my experiences, but that's unfortunately not the case all around. But yeah.
Well, in that case, Donna, actually, I wanted to move along and ask you the next question. So you are the accessibility expert that we have in the room right now. And there's a lot of people that might be joining the call that accessibility, that sounds like something that you'd find on the back of the cereal box. They have no idea what that is. So first off, could you talk a little bit about digital accessibility, what it is, but then could you talk a little bit about what kinds of digital accessibility barriers people with disabilities may face during the interview process, and what can an employer do about it?
Absolutely. Accessibility is essentially making your content more available to everyone. It's really just the core of that. And whether that be color contrast or the captions, I'm so sorry, everyone. I am following along in the chat. I'm so sorry for our technical difficulties today. I hope that if there's a Chrome plugin or something that you're able to at least follow along, because your participation matters. But anything from that to color contrast to not having really distracting patterns, to the logistical details of somebody who's using assistive technologies, for example, a screen reader, but not limited to, navigating the actual experience in being able to take in that information. And it's nothing above and beyond. It's actually just really good practices to make sure that, frankly, the 30% or more of the disability community here can access that information. Some of the ways it can show up, I mentioned captions, I mentioned I mentioned the logistics, but it can also be just general kind of considerations. Um, I always tease, like not tease, haha, but tease like lovingly that there's nothing special about being disabled. It's just another part of the human experience. You know, I'm female. I live rurally. These are all parts of the things that make me me. And all of that coming together is just part of that. So it should never be special. It should never be an add-on. It should never be done after the fact. It should just be do the bit of homework and research into it. And for companies who are not that familiar, this is included in the USA's American with Disabilities 504 Act, the European Accessibility Act, which comes out in June, or comes into effect, I should say, in June, is going to have a global impact. So as much as I hate leaning on laws, because we should just want to, we help all people get jobs. We want to help all people access your content. We also really want to take this opportunity to not, just lean only on those laws. We want to lean on the fact that we want all people to be included, because it's the different perspectives and the different learnings that we take away that really empower us moving forward.
I love that. And I think with digital accessibility, what's important to keep in mind is that it is a changing and evolving landscape. There are some basic fundamentals that you can think about, but it is changing and is constantly presents itself with unique challenges. Case in point, literally the webinar that we're hosting right now, we're facing some technical difficulties. So again, I apologize about that, and we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that the content is accessible after the fact. But it's something that the many companies just don't try, or they don't try enough. And really, it is incumbent upon you as a company to try to make that extra effort and that step to make sure that all individuals can. And the best thing that you can do is try to plan ahead for when these things come out too. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, and I just want to add a little add-on point. We all know there's nobody twisting their mustache in the back room going, ha, 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 I don't want this accessible.
Yeah.
It's usually because people have conflicting priorities. They have limited scope, limited budget, limited this, and they don't understand where to fit it in. And just real quick, put it in right in your planning process, put it in your initial ideation and road mapping stages. And suddenly it's not this, oh my gosh, after. Yes, a lot of organizations are going to have what you call technical debt, meaning things that were missed along the way. But it doesn't mean that it has to always be like that. So there's no bad guy in the room, so to speak. What it is that we need to find ways to make it work within your workflows, within your processes, with your vendor relationships, whatever that may be. Because just like everyone here is talking about, oh my gosh, after the fact, there'll be captions. We're so sorry. Things do happen. And it's a matter of putting in as many guardrails as you can to pivot. For example, the captions being available after the fact. It's not ideal, but it's what we have to do a lot of the times. And I kind of wanted to take the blame out of this, because a lot of people with accessibility or this content in general, if they're not familiar with it, will feel a little defensive, and there's no blame. This is just educational so we can address everybody in the room.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate that. And moving along on the topic, this next question is for Larissa. So, Larissa, this is something that I've experienced over the years where I am a pretty good interviewer. I'm pretty good at being interviewed, I'm pretty good at doing interviews, and I'd oftentimes have a bit of a natural charisma to me. And this is not just meant for me to pat myself on the back, but rather it's to point out that it's a very different for people with different communication patterns. So, something that I've observed over the years is that oftentimes it's the most charismatic person that will get the job and not necessarily the person that is best suited for the role. And this is unfortunate because there's a lot of roles that don't require charisma. There's not a lot of roles that people have different kinds of skills where the most charismatic person might not to be the most qualified for it. So what I want to dig into a little bit more is what kinds of questions can employers ask to assess somebody based off of ability and skills as opposed to just how well they interview?
So first, when we think about interview questions, it's important to focus on what actually reflects someone's ability, especially if, as Miles pointed out, being charismatic is not essential to the job. If the role requires thinking on your feet, it's okay to include some questions that test that, but make sure you're assessing the right thing. You want to know how someone reasons through a problem or how they handle unexpected information, not how smooth or charismatic they sound in the moment. So if responding under pressure is truly part of the job, you can still assess that, but make sure you're clear about what's being evaluated. So if you're looking for creativity, logical steps, or communication style, let candidates know in advance what to expect and what you're looking for. Avoid vague or abstract questions or ones that rely on charm or small talk. Also avoid simple yes or no questions that don't reveal actual skill. Instead, ask about real tasks, like how would you approach this challenge? What would you do if? It's also, again, best practice to let every candidate know in advance what types of questions they'll be asked. This helps level the playing field, especially for candidates who may communicate or process differently, or anyone with anxiety or different learning styles who might be highly qualified but get thrown off by surprises. I'm one of those people. It can help to explain to all candidates why a question is being asked. I once got asked, tell me about a time you failed. I focused so much on the failure, I didn't realize that they were actually looking for how I grew from it. That's why a quick explanation can make a big difference. Having that context helps candidates show what they're truly capable of. And when interviews focus on relevant, concrete questions and offer transparency up front, you're giving everyone a fair chance to show what they can do.
I love that. Such a comprehensive answer. And really, what you need to take away from that is look at the job description, like look at what the person's actually going to be doing on a day to day basis. There's something that I know Donna is very passionate about with Indeed, and that's a skills based hiring approach. That's something that Indeed has been on board for a long time with. But I know that many people within the disability community have been advocating for this for years. And the challenge that employers run into is that a lot of times they may be copy pasting a job description over and over and over again. I call this the devil in your copy paste. And a lot of times it's carrying over stuff that is unnecessary in the job description from one job to the next. You might also see this in the way of ability to lift 30 pounds or ability to sit throughout the course of the workday. So it's important to look at the job description closely and actually ask, is this necessary and is this required? But then the other thing that I would challenge you on is we all have biases. We all have biases when it comes to employment and hiring. So it's important that you look inward as an interviewer and consider, what are my biases going into this? How am I perceiving people? And how can I be more open-minded to different people and how they may communicate or think differently than me? Donna or Travis, anything else that you would add to that answer?
Yeah, I think interviewing is pretty complex. Just yeah, I mean, I could spend like 30 minutes on just talking about it, but Yeah, I think it is important to know what you're getting yourself into beforehand in terms of the questions. Um, but at the yeah, I mean, at the same time, I think just interviewing as a whole should be looked at like kind of reimagined, and maybe these things that we're talking about, like a skills-based approach, is like what should be done across the board and not like how it's always done. Because you listen to the same questions, it seems like no matter what job you're interviewing for, it's the same, and it's like cookie cutter, and it gets annoying every time, to me personally. um and then you don't know if the person that is actually interviewing you, if they already have somebody in mind. So it's like how fair is actually these interviews in general, um, when you don't know what is actually going on behind the scenes. But that's me being cynical. But at the end of the day, we're just talking about um, making sure that the interviews and the questions are accessible, and yeah, it shouldn't be based off of charisma, and it should be based off of skills. um, and so yeah, I think employers should just kind of look at how they're going about doing the interview process.
And oh, go ahead, Donna.
And I think it's really important also to keep in mind that when people answer you, they might not describe how you imagine the job getting done, but if they have skills to get the job done effectively, maybe be open-minded in terms of how. So for example, you might have an incredible employee who's nonverbal. So they use a text to voice technology when needing to communicate, or they use captions or whatnot, or sorry, chats and whatnot. You have how the job gets done doesn't have to be what you've always imagined it to be, or what your experience, maybe you had that job. Maybe somebody's going to change, and it could be technology, it could just be a different way of thinking about it, coming at the issue from a slightly different perspective. But regardless of what that is, I also challenge you, as much as everything Larissa and Travis have been saying, and Miles, you too, has been exactly right on. I'd also suggest really opening your mind and asking questions, because if something doesn't make sense, it might not be that the person's not demonstrating the skills. It might be they're coming at it from a slightly different angle, because when you've had to live your life in a world that makes you figure it out on how to get from A to B, maybe their trajectory was a little different, but they got there, and sometimes it's that much more impactful or effective. So ask the questions, how is this working? And being open-minded to different ways.
Donna, the ironic part to this for me is that many employers are so focused on innovation, and you have innovation happening every single day. People with disabilities are some of the most innovative bunch that you will imagine, because they are overcoming barriers and challenges that you didn't even know exist. They're overcoming these barriers. They are being successful with those barriers in place. And so it's incumbent upon you to take a step back and, like you said, look at the job, look at how they're communicating. Is it happening? Is it still happening, one way or the other? Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I wanted to drill into this a little bit more. And Travis, I'm going to flip this back to you first, but other panelists, feel free to chime in as well. You talked about how you feel a little bit cynical with the process. You feel a little bit burnt out sometimes with the process. And I wanted to ask, what is your least favorite interview question? And from a disability inclusion perspective, and why do you dislike it?
um I don't know if I have just one, but I'm not going to name a whole bunch. I um Yeah, I probably like, what's your greatest strength and or weakness, or tell us about a time that you've dealt with conflicts. I don't know. I just think that there's better ways to go about getting to the crux of the answer. I mean, I think, having a disability can be both, can be a strength and a weakness. And if you look at it from, I'll just use like the physical disability, you look at it just from the service level, sure, it might be looked at objectively as a weakness, but when you actually start talking to somebody that's got a physical disability, you can actually see that it is a strength because they've been able to use these innate abilities that they have developed over time, like creativity, resilience, grit, like all these things that maybe the average employee doesn't have. And so, um, but how much of that is really considered in the interview process? Like, when it comes down to it, it's like all these employers cares about the bottom line, right? But how about, what actually makes a good teammate um, to get the job done? And, what about if you bring in the person with the disability, how that actually positively impacts the team morale? Like, what about all these other things that the average employer is not thinking about? So that's you're gonna get me going, Miles, but yeah. So I think that's just something that goes through my mind when I hear these questions.
It's so challenging too, isn't it? Because literally what you just described right there is like all of the number one interview questions that I hear over and over and over again. So I don't know if we'll have a single answer for you, but I think it's worthwhile reflecting on it and thinking about it. Larissa, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Okay, and I'll be quick. So, a question that I used to be asked is no longer a problem, but this is very common for people with disabilities. Is I have been asked in the past about a job gap, and I understand why it's being asked, but to me, a better question to ask is saying something like, "Can you share anything about that time that might help us understand your path or how you're approaching work now?" Instead of asking why someone has a gap. I think that helps invite context without demanding an explanation.
Provide context without providing an explanation. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. And Donna, anything that you would add, like your interview questions that kind of bug you that you see pop up over and over again?
Sometimes actually I dislike the where did you go to school or where did you work? Because I feel as though you can develop the same skills even if you have maybe, not had the same opportunities. Early in my career, I've already mentioned I live rurally. You know, I didn't work at some of the I worked at lots of agencies. I didn't work at the fancy agencies, but I was doing the same work. I was acquiring the same skills. I was putting in the time, the energy, the learning, the interactions. I was keeping up with the technologies. I was doing the same work. And I think that if we start, we're facing, frankly, some parts of the world are already feeling global labor shortages and things like this. If we start looking at this and we start realizing, people with disabilities maybe weren't given the same educational opportunities, maybe weren't given the same opportunities for some of those more prestigious sounding places. Maybe what we can realize is, again, focusing on the skills. What have you learned? Where do you want to go? What is your potential? Where have you come? How far have you come in terms of learning those skills? How can they be applied to this work? I think it takes a level off and takes some of the pressure off to present in that charismatic way Larissa mentioned, and just talk about what you bring with you.
Absolutely. And Donna, we're going to turn it right back around onto you, and we're going to talk about the single biggest buzzword of 2025. And I am tired of talking about it, but gosh darn it, we are going to be talking about it anyway, and that is artificial intelligence. But I want to expand the scope a little bit more too. Something that I have seen recently is a company called HireView, but there's similar other companies that are out there that do something called one-way interviews. Now, if you're joining us right now and you're a job seeker, it's entirely possible that you will be doing one of these in the near future with a large company. And that is where you record yourself into a video camera answering questions with a countdown timer going in the upper left-hand corner. So describe to me a time blank. Okay, you've got 40 seconds. Now start talking really, really fast. Now, the reason that I have a problem with this is that from a disability inclusion perspective, imagine that you have anxiety disorder. Imagine that you have a traumatic brain injury. Imagine that you think differently, and it is really, really stressful for you to do something like this. I get a little bit nervous about putting people in that situation in the first place, but B, then using artificial intelligence to analyze the responses that you get. And it goes back to that charisma thing, right? How well can you talk into a camera for 40 seconds? And those might be the people that perform the best. But as employers deploy new technologies, such as these one-way interviews and artificial intelligence to screen all of our resumes, is there a way that they can do this in a way that is more disability inclusive for all people?
Yes. There you go. Answer. No, it's kidding. So, at Indeed, we talk a lot about using AI to make hiring more human. It's to take away some of the tasks so that way we can focus on that human connection. Finding the right skills, the right fit, the right skill set for the right role, and helping bring people together and match them. And in terms of AI being more inclusive, it really is going to come down to programming, and it's going to, in Donna's opinion, come down to getting people with disabilities helping program those AIs. Anybody from the disability community, or not anybody, a lot of us from the disability community hear you say timers, and I mean, my face did it, because we all know that that is exclusive to so many people. But for a lot of people, or a lot of organizations, they're thinking in terms of how much memory, how much storage, how much this, that, or whatnot. So if you have people with disabilities in the room when they're programming them, that's more effective. If you're a hiring manager who's looking to deploy these, well, then maybe you should, first of all, check out what your options are. And think about ways that AI can make hiring more human. We have tools on Indeed. This isn't for selling. I won't go into them. But we do have tools based on trying to bring people together more. And if whatever tool you're using isn't helping you connect more, then I'm going to ask you if it's helping you get the right people for the job. And if you're a job seeker and you're faced with that, see if there's a way to ask, frankly, as an access need or an accommodation, hey, can we look at XYZ? Sorry, got a little distracted. Yeah. So I will stop there, I think.
Thank you very much, Donna. I think that right now, in my opinion, we stand at a moment of a crossroads. We have new technology that is being rolled out very, very, very quickly, and artificial intelligence has the potential to remove a lot of the bias that is already in existing HR systems. So we look at things like people screening people out because of resume gaps. Well, that might be because somebody faced trouble getting employment, or had to manage a chronic illness and take some time away from the workforce. We talk about people that might be perceived as job hoppers because they struggle to get accommodations wherever they land. There's all kinds of different patterns that emerge on resumes over and over again. And if we train the artificial intelligence models to replicate these patterns of bias, we're just going to see it in decades to come. So we have an opportunity right now to rethink how we're doing this. Larissa, Travis, anything that you would add, particularly any experiences that you have had within the last couple of years working with technology in the hiring process?
No, I mean, I have used an AI writing software for resumes, but yeah, I mean, that's not something like I have opinions about AI, but when it comes to like the hiring process, like that's not necessarily my wheelhouse. But I do think that if we learn how to kind of use AI to our advantage, but that's probably the only up to the extent that I will comment on because there's you know people that have used it more extensively that can speak better about it than me.
Fair enough. I know that there's a lot of I know that there's a lot of opinions about AI. I have a lot of artist friends that are losing work right now because of it. Larissa, I think you took yourself off mute for a second. Go ahead.
Yes. And I just want to say briefly, some studies are suggesting that AI can be unintentionally biased against people with disabilities, including autistic people.
Hmm.
But I believe there are ways, and we're starting to find out more information to make sure that AI tools, especially like AI interview intelligence tools, are more accessible because it can actually help ensure consistency across interviews when done in a way where that is the goal. That can help with sometimes there's gaps where employers may unintentionally look at things like confidence instead of like the actual experience. So you can actually use AI to kind of get more consistent responses. And really quickly, there are some studies suggesting that AI tools can help the interviewee, especially autistic people. There are some tools that can help give like live feedback during interviews, and that actually help the autistic individuals perform better on the interview.
I love that. Thank you, Larissa. And actually, the next question that I had was for you too, so you can keep yourself off of mute. Where have you seen neurodiverse candidates struggle in the interview process? And quite frankly, what can employers do to be more inclusive of neurodiverse folks and those with autism too?
Okay, and first, every neurodivergent person is different. I also want to say I should have defined this earlier when I first used the term, but just really quick, when I'm using neurodivergent, I'm using it in the broader social justice sense. So that means anyone who deviates from neuronormative expectations and identifies as neurodivergent. So as Miles said, that can include autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, mental health conditions, cognitive and neurological differences, and more. With that being said, many neurodivergent candidates struggle with first impressions in interviews, not because of lack of skill, but because interviewers are often trained to judge based on neurotypical standards of confidence or leadership. For example, some people may not make eye contact, or they may make too much. Others may stem or self regulate in repetitive ways, so they might rock our pace. Some might speak with a flat effect, so they may not change how their voice sounds very much. They may have speak in the same tone, or they may not engage in small talk or may use a lot of filler words. And some may be non speaking and use technology to talk. So always presume competence. Know that these differences can be misunderstood. And if these traits aren't essential to the job, it's important to not let them influence hiring decisions. And again, we often make hiring decisions based on surface level impressions. And when we do that, we miss someone's real potential. In the past, I've been told that I can't be a leader because of how I speak. Yet I currently serve in multiple leadership roles, including at the national level. Also, really quickly, be aware that studies suggest that masking or hiding neurodivergent traits can lead to burnout or exhaustion, depression, anxiety, and even suicidal ideation. And these can affect how productive someone is. So, to make interviews more inclusive, focus on answers and actual skills relevant to the essential roles. I think it's already been mentioned, but allow candidates to provide examples of past work if applicable. I'm partial to, and this was mentioned earlier, I think by Donna, offering alternative formats or supplements interviews, but also considering a paid trial job for top candidates can help. And lastly, inclusive interviews are about building more entry points. So when we value communication differences and processing style differences and judge based on substance, we create hiring practices that reflect real equity.
I love that. Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say plus 100 to everything Larissa said, but also make a note that consider this all on the phone screening stage. If you're a part of a larger company, a lot of companies do a phone screening that unintentionally screen out not only your deaf and hard of hearing or nonverbal communities, but your neurodivergent community as well. Just given those quick, rapid fire, short 15-minute high pressure calls. Again, like everything she said, consider the larger picture of what you're actually looking for.
Thank you very much. And I want to highlight one point that Larissa made. Neurodivergence is not just autism. It is many things. So it's any cognitive difference. And any people that are newer to the field of disability inclusion studies, keep this in mind too, that disability is more than just being in a wheelchair. A lot of times we hear disability and we imagine what is visible and obvious about a person. And yes, that is sometimes the case, but there's so many other disabilities that are out there. So thank you, Larissa and Donna, for your comment right there. The next one, I'm going to get a little bit close to some of the current events, but I want to make sure that we don't stray into the area of politics. But I think that is an important question to address. So Larissa, this one is for you. With the proposed federal funding cuts would come cuts to services that people with disabilities rely on to gain and maintain employment. So could you speak to the value of these services and what would be affected and how employers can utilize other services going forward to continue to support people with disabilities?
Okay, so without getting political, with the loss of federal funding would come a loss of services as well as you said that people with disabilities rely on to gain and maintain employment. So that could significantly impact programs that support people with disabilities and finding and maintaining employment, but that also includes early intervention, caregiver support, community-based services, and workforce development. And these all play a critical role in building inclusive workplaces, even if it involves different life stages. If these supports are reduced or eliminated, many disabled people could lose access to needed services like job coaching, transportation, accommodations, or training, and this will create new barriers to employment. This doesn't just affect individuals, it could have a ripple effect on economy and employers and the progress we made towards disability inclusion. And I also want to be clear that even if these potential impacts sound abstract, they have real life consequences on who gets to participate in the workforce and who gets left out. Employers can step up by applying those universal design principles that we talked about earlier, making accommodations easier to request, making sure that people with disabilities are involved early on in helping make the whole process more accessible, and encouraging open and supportive communication. Lastly, I want to point out that building inclusive workplaces isn't just the right thing to do. It's also how we unlock talent, creativity, and equity across every industry.
Thank you, Larissa. I appreciate those. So one thing that I would point out to people that are on the call that are neither one way here or there, just because you don't use a service yourself doesn't mean that it doesn't bring value to people and doesn't mean that it doesn't bring value to the larger society. So I think right now we are again at a crossroads where we have some decisions to make about exactly what we value as a society. And that's as far as into it as I'm going to go. There are different outlets for you to make your voice heard one way or the other. There are different individuals that you can reach out to, but that's not my area of expertise. I would encourage you to reach out to different advocacy organizations to specify what your opinions are. Now, we are coming up close to the end of the time here, but I want to make sure that we do get the last couple of questions in. So, Donna, we're asking all the hard questions here, and I've got one more hard question for you, and that is that some candidates may be uncomfortable with things like panel-style interviews or other elements within the interview process. But as HR people, we want to treat all candidates equally throughout the process. So how do we balance accommodations with an individual's discomfort or accommodation request?
And that is a really fair and great question. I think I'm going to lean back on what Larissa was saying earlier of, is it a part of the job function? If the job function is to be in front of a panel and ask questions, especially if they're those rapid fire off the cuff, you can prepare but not really know the questions kind of things. If that's part of the job function, that should absolutely be part of the interview process because you're testing for the skills in that type of skill set in that area. However, if at the end of the day you are judging on skills and that is not a part of what's required for the role, then question how you're doing the process. And maybe you're large, you need a standardized process. But the question wouldn't be then, well, is it an accommodation then really breaking the standard? No, you're providing an accommodation so that you can still base on the skills that are actually needed to perform the duties and getting the most out of that employee, out of that role, and for the organization. As much as I want to say this is about being good, none of this is altruistic. None of this is. This is so people hire the best talent with the most of applicable skills to fill the job. This isn't a feel-good moment. So if a skill isn't that panel interview or whatever aspect of the interview process someone's uncomfortable with, then it shouldn't be required as part of it, and that shouldn't be a concern in terms of an accommodation. Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to.
I love what you said there because every single day I'm approached by customers and they tell me over and over again, I can't find talent. I can't find talent. I can't find talent. And I go, respectfully, maybe this is an opportunity to look inward at some of the barriers that you are creating, because traditionally we've looked at interviews as a series of hurdles that individuals need to jump over or crawl under in order to be able to get the job. We need to give them a trial by fire, but maybe we need to shift our thinking and how can we make people comfortable? How can we make people look their best for the interview and present the best? And how can we assess people in a more neutral and objective manner too? So thank you, Donna. And Travis, this last one is for you before we wrap it up for the day. So what kinds of what kinds of inclusive language should we include in the interview? And could you give us a 2-minute crash course on disability etiquette guidelines when we actually get somebody with a disability in our interview?
Disability. Well, maybe I'll answer the second part first. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one because not everybody, like when you meet one person with a disability, you meet one person with a disability. So I don't know if there's like blanket statements that I could say that would suffice everybody's thoughts with the disability and how they would like to be treated. I mean, when it comes down to is like respect and having the act of listening, but in terms of like person first language versus identity first language, like that's also something that people with disabilities differ. There's no consensus on that because of just what I mentioned before. So, I think that there are some words that shouldn't be used in the interview process, especially when you are referring to somebody with a disability. But yeah, I think the etiquette really comes down to listening, asking questions, not making assumptions, and really trying to have a conversation with that individual and make it not so rigid. Because if you're just going back and forth, then I think the biases creep in. But once you actually get to know a person, then I think the interview process will go a lot smoother.
I love that. So many valuable bits of wisdom here from Travis, Donna, and Larissa. I want to thank each of y'all for jumping on today to join me. And by the way, any one of these topics we could probably do an entire webinar on, but I know we had to hit hot and fast here, but I appreciate each of you sharing your wisdom on these moments. So thank you, Donna, thank you, Travis, and thank you, Larissa, for popping on with me. And I'm going to bring back on Aaron. And Aaron, that was a good panel, wasn't it?
It was an awesome panel. All three panelists, just really great information to share about the interview process. I think one of the big things I took away from that is accommodations just aren't just for when you have the job. Accommodations can be part of the interview process. And I stealing a line from a colleague of mine, Susan Mazrui, who describes accommodations. They're really as productivity tools, right? And how do you make sure that you are at your best for not only your job but the process to get the job, which is the interview. And we've had a previous discussion here in this series about self-disclosure, and obviously that's not always a trade-off that is easy to make, but thinking about making sure you're putting your best foot forward during that interview, and really highlighting the strengths you bring to that job. Also really important, I think, to pick up on there that from our panelists, the best person for that job may not be the one that you have in your mind when you go into that process. And I think that's really important for businesses and companies and organizations to remind ourselves that a lot of times we're looking for new talent, new ideas, new approaches to things to best meet the demands of the market and our clients and so forth. And so take a step back and really focus on what that position really needs, and that person with the best skill set, the best match, and maybe even to exceed your ideas of what could be possible in that job, may be that person with a disability that is coming through either the figure door on a digital side or the literal door on the physical side.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Aaron, and thank you to all the folks that have joined us today. I hope that you were able to take something away with this. By the way, I wanted to let you know that we are planning on doing events in May, because May is Mental Health Awareness. It might be virtual or it might be in person, but stay tuned for more from Disability in Central Texas and me and Aaron and all the folks here. We're so glad that you were able to join us. Feel free to reach out if you do have questions, and we'll make sure that we can get you connected to the right resources, especially as times continue to change. So